we go. So thank you for coming back to watch another episode of Rugspirations, where we meet rug hookers from all over and different styles and different backgrounds. And I'm so excited to chat today with Meryl Cook from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Welcome, Meryl. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much, Robin. It's great to be here. What a great idea to do this series.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. I really love it. And I've got to meet people that I otherwise wouldn't necessarily have time to chat with. And people that watch have been sharing great feedback and support and just enjoying getting to meet other people and learn a little bit about you. You know, this is all about you for a little while. So we'd love to know more. So we'll get right into the questions. The first one I always ask people, and if you're watching for the first time, I ask the same questions, but we never know where they will take us. So the first one is, what or who got you started in rug making?
Oh, that's a funny story. So my sister and I were on vacation on the South Shore of Nova Scotia, and we wanted to buy a gift for our mom, Nancy Cook, who was a well-known rug hooker in the Ontario Rug Hooking Guild. And so we went into Encompassing Designs in Mahone Bay, and my sister looked around and she said, "Look at all the colorful designs here." And she said, "I think you've got all that leftover wool," because I was quite the knitter and I was always working with beautiful yarns. She said, you could hook with those yarns. You could use up some of your stash, because my sister's all about getting rid of clutter. Anyway, so we went in and I found a pattern of a fish, and the staff person at Encompassing Designs just showed me how to hook, how to pull a few loops. And I bought the kit, and we went back to our hotel and I started it. And we called my mom and we said, "Oh, I just started hooking." And she was like, my sister could hear her clear across the room. She's like, "Oh my God, what are you hooking and what pattern?" And she wanted to know the pattern. She went online and she looked it up, and so from there, I just was hooked. I had leftover yarn from that pattern, so I made myself another fish and hooked it with the leftovers, and that was really the beginning. And then I found Deanne Fitzpatrick, which was she was really my main teacher, and she really inspired me to do my own design. So
right. And had you not been pulled to try it by seeing
not
your
at all.
No.
So my mom was a very traditional rug hooker. She started hooking when we were in our teens, and she was all about, you got to take this class first and then this class, and you got to do your shading this way. And she hooked in number 3 cut. And I just thought, oh my God, like, kill me now. So I was not at all interested in hooking. And unfortunately, she left me 32 unfinished pieces, and they're all on burlap and number 3 cut. And I've finished a couple of small pieces, but I can't finish them. So I'll have to deal with that at some point.
Yeah. My mom was not a rug hooker, but she was a quilter, and I have several, and I can sew, but her style of quilting and the points and everything, I just can't. Anyway, I have yet to decide what I'm doing with them, because I can't get rid of them, but I can't finish them.
I know. Well, mom passed away in June last year. And so I'm kind of, I know eventually I'll have to deal with them, probably take them to the Rug Hooking Museum or something like that for them to sell. But
Wow. And so now, do you design all your own patterns?
Pretty much.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought.
I started with a few of Deanne's women patterns and things like that. And at one point I took a lot of in-person classes with her. And at one point she turned to me, she said, "You don't need another pattern. You should be doing your own patterns." And she would even, if I did a pattern, she would even feel free to say, "Now, I think you could do better than that. You need to change that up. That's too conventional. You just need to really think about it." And so I started doing a lot of abstract work and really enjoying it.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, I've never been able to go to Deanne's studio, but it's on my wish list.
It was such a lucky time for me, because she was teaching a lot, and that's where I met a lot of my really good hooking buddies and people that I'm still in connection with. And
it's a pretty small community. Like once you get into it and start to meet people.
Absolutely.
The
people
same names
travel for long ways to come to classes. So
I was scheduled to go in 2020, and I had to, obviously it didn't happen. And so, yeah, someday I will make it there and take a class. But
Yeah, she has one class coming up. It's her first live class in a
I
very
know.
long time. I think it's a 3-day class.
Yeah, yeah, sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of the process, like the design, the color planning,
Oh
the
my God.
collecting supplies? Like, if you had to pick, I know it's a terrible question.
I'm terrible at this because there are aspects of every part of the process that I absolutely love. So I write in my journal and do all my designs as
Right.
inspired by my journaling, right? So I love that part. Whenever I do a design, I just fold the page down and know that I can go back to it when I'm ready to do another design. Um,
Right.
I love even just sewing the linen onto my Shetty Camp frame. I
Mm,
use clothespins and I get it all set up and then I just start sewing and it's just very meditative, right?
yeah.
And I love choosing the colors. I mean, I'm kind of all about color. And
Mhm.
so the color selection, the way that I do it is I have my frame set up and the pattern set up, and then I just start piling fibers on the frame and standing back looking at them. And if they look okay, I do it. If not, I take some away. Sometimes I'll take photos of them to see if there's enough contrast. I'll turn my photo to black and white.
Yeah.
So I love that part. I love the hooking. I think just feeling fibers. I've always been a fiber person. I mean, I started with macrame and and lots of knitting and crocheting, and I've always liked natural fibers. That's kind of where I gravitate. Natural fibers like wool or silk. So I love the hooking process. My frame is in the middle of our living room, dining room, and I look out at the Halifax Harbor,
Oh,
look across at Halifax downtown, and everything is going on around me. So it doesn't make for a very tidy dining room, living room, but I don't care.
yeah.
So yeah, so I love the colors. I love the hooking. I even love the finishing. There's something very nice about, I often will miter my corners. I don't usually use rug tape at the back of my rugs because I write on my rugs on the linen around the rug as whatever inspired the rug that was in my journal. I write it on the linen usually, and so when I turn the back under, I want the writing to show, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, so yeah, but I love that process.
And I'm just curious, I've seen you talk about this before, so I have an inkling about it, but can you share about how that started for you? Like, if you started with the fish pattern, how did you go then to include journaling? Because that's not a common
Right.
practice amongst,
Yeah.
at least not that I know of.
No.
Um,
So I had a pretty big health event. I had breast cancer in 2015, and I decided that I would leave my practice as a homeopath. I'd been a homeopath for 20 years, and but I didn't know what I was going to do. And just after I finished all of my treatments, I went to a workshop led by Sherry Fitch, who's a Canadian author who's fabulous, and she had a workshop about journaling, and then she was with a yoga teacher. So we were talking about how when you unblock using writing, you unblock your creativity. When you do some movement, you can unblock your creativity. So right from that day forward, so it was the week I finished radiation, I started journaling, and I have been journaling ever since. So that was January 2016. So yeah, and
Beautiful.
really my journaling has become the inspiration for all of my work. Yeah.
That is really special because I don't think I've ever met somebody who does it that intentionally. Sometimes it certainly can happen
Yeah.
but it's not always with that kind of intention. And then to put that mark right on the piece, not just have it in your journal, but then to continue it with the words on the back is pretty neat.
Yeah, for me it was really just a great way of holding space for myself. I was writing and then I was hooking, and so the connection just was very logical and very natural for me to do that. And when I write on the linen, it's almost like a meditation,
Mhm.
because as I'm hooking, I'm seeing it. Like I'm working on a piece right now called Wild Woman is Feeling Inspired. And I'm working on the bottom part where I can see the title of the piece. And it's just, I don't know, it's just, it adds a dimension for me.
Yeah,
My,
really personal.
yeah. Thanks.
Um, Is there anything in your rug hooking journey that you wish you'd learned sort of sooner, or something that when you meet a new rug hooker, you're like, oh, I want to share this little tidbit because it's so important to me? Like, is there something that you'd like to share?
So there's nothing that I wish I'd learned sooner, because I feel like everything I learned came at the exact right time. It was just like, it's what I really needed to learn at that time. So, but when I work with beginners, which I do a lot, I tell them two things. I say, make it your own.
Mm.
Even if you're working with a pattern, make it your own. Choose to do the sky and swirls if you want to, or choose your favorite fiber, and work with that. And then the other one is that really rug hooking is like life. It's like one loop at a time, right? And so you don't need to know where the whole rug is going. I mean, I know some people that's how they work, but the way that I work is that I start with an idea and I start with materials, and then I kind of go from there and let it flow and see what's working, see what inspires me to go. And so, I think rug hooking, the one loop at a time theory, is really something that I wish everybody knew about life and about rug hooking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you're not a rug hooker, there's a lesson there.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 So I'm curious then, when you start a new rug, do you have a vision in your head of what you think it will be and then it may evolve? Or is it just sort of like, I'm open to see what happens?
Usually I have a vision.
Okay.
Like the piece that I'm working on right now is really, it's totally different than anything I've ever hooked before. It's another one of my wild women. But the color palette is very different. It's a lot of golds and browns, and I still am going to have the chakra colors in there, but they won't be as front and center as they normally are. And the other thing that's really different about this piece is that I have the main design, and then I have the background is hooked in more or less straight lines. Not
Oh,
hooked in straight lines, but I'm filling in lines. I never hook in straight lines, but
yeah, I was like, wow, that's
yeah,
really
no.
different.
But it's and the piece is it's a very big piece for me anyway, and it's about how when you're inspired, how you need to stay connected to the earth, but also be connected to the heavens, or to whatever you call it. So her feet are about 2/3 of the way down, and then there's roots growing out of her feet. And so all the bottom is earth colors. And then her dress is a tree trunk. And then her hair is tree branches. So
Oh,
it's all in these earth colors that I don't normally work in. So
wow.
I don't know where I was going with that, but I'm pretty excited about it, as you can tell.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. I love it. Um, yeah, that's awesome. Do you have, I know you mentioned you prefer natural fibers or drawn to them. Do you have a material or a tool or frame, hook, something that you're like, oh, this is my favorite, and without it, it wouldn't be the same?
So I think I have 3 tools. So one
Okay.
is my Camp frame, because I love to see a bigger piece of the piece that I'm working on.
Mhm.
And I don't like putting things on and off of gripper frames, because I work with so many textures. And then I have a hook that I got from Ingrid Hieronymus in Ontario. She was my mom's friend. I think it's a Hartman. And she and my mom went and had coffee, and they just put a bunch of hooks in front of me, and they said,
Right.
what feels good, try it. So this is the one I chose, and I've been hooking with it ever since.
Nice.
And then I have these scissors that Deanne sells, that they're not expensive scissors. I hooked before with, the bent edge
Yeah.
and everything, but these are just like super sharp, really small. And when I teach, I recommend them, and they just last forever. And yeah, you don't have to sharpen them and all those kinds of things. So those
Yeah,
are my,
sharp scissors are important.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I like to work with natural fibers. So I learned to spin 4 years ago now. I taught myself how to spin, because I was breaking the bank on all of the thick and thin slub yarns from Fleece Artist I would get from Deanne, and so sorry Deanne, but I'm not I'm not buying as much yarn. So I do a lot of spinning, and I actually have started processing fleece, Nova Scotia fleece,
Wow.
into yarn. So it's become this like rabbit hole of, yeah. And
Yes.
then
Yes.
recently, in the last 2 years, I've been incorporating wet felting into my hooking. And so I almost feel about wet felting like I feel about hooking, which was like a natural. Wet felting, the techniques um, are a little more precise and really challenge me because I don't like a whole lot of structure. but I'm persisting because I think the finished products are so beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Amazing. And what about dyeing then? Like, are you processing
Oh,
in terms of dyeing as well?
yeah, I do. I do my own dyeing as well. I work with a lot of recycled fibers. I haven't bought any recently because I had such a huge stash, but I do go to Value Village and buy wool clothing whenever I can and dye it. And I was Lucy Richard taught me how to dye, and I took a few of her classes. And it's to me, it was much simpler than. I also inherited a lot of dyes from my mom and all her dye formulas, but they were they're a lot more work than just making up your jars and working from there. So in general, I have my sort of chakra colors made up, and I just use them. So Lucy's was a great teacher for that.
Yes. Yeah. That's how I started, all through like online learning with her at the beginning of the
Yeah,
pandemic. I was like, I'm not going to dye before, because I thought I have so much stuff. Like I have a lot of yarn from my knitting days. And I
yeah.
was like, no, I don't need to dye. It's too much. But then after watching her a little bit, I was like, okay, I have to try this. And now I just feel like a magician when I dye. Like I just get so
So fun.
excited.
I there's nothing more fun than a nice sunny day having your dye pots on the stove and then having yarn on the clothesline. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, the theory of using up your stash, it just never seems to work. I just keep adding to my stash
Yeah.
and I lose things, but I add more than I use.
Yeah, I don't think it's a balance, and it's certainly not getting rid of the stash, but I'm okay with that. I've come to terms with that, and to me, that is the part of the beauty. And I share it, like
Yeah,
I want to share. So if somebody needs something, um, but yeah, it's not going away.
no, I hear you.
And I'm just curious too, what kind of foundation fabric do you like? Like
I love
you
linen.
linen,
Yeah,
okay.
I love the feel of linen. I like that it's strong. My mom had hooked. My mom's specialty was Oriental mats, and she hooked quite a few on burlap, and they're just falling apart.
Oh,
And there's
are
nothing
they-
I can do about it. And would have spent like a year and a half doing some of these mats, and they're
oh, it's
exquisite.
heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. It is. So no, I like the feel of linen.
Mhm.
Because it's a little bit flexible and but has this. It's not so dusty as burlap. And
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, nice. Um, can you describe, and I think we've touched on it in all of this conversation, but why you keep coming back to rug cooking? Like what makes it that this is what I want to keep doing? Because obviously you're talented in many areas, but what is the special? Is there something you can articulate and share or?
well, there's a couple of things. One is that I think it's really grounding for me. To just sit and hook. In January, I was taking an online felting class that was very intense. And I was felting and felting like 5 hours a day. And I could hardly wait when I finished to sit down again and hook, because I only had room for either my felting table or my Shetty cam frame in my living room. So I had to put away my hooking. And it's like this big relief when I'm able to sit down and hook, or if I'm away traveling and I come home, the thing I look forward to is besides my family is to sit down and hook. And sometimes the hooking comes first, but yeah, it's that grounding. That hooking to me feels like home. I mean, when I first learned it felt natural. And some of the other things I've learned, spinning did not feel natural to start, and wet felting did not feel natural, and it doesn't yet feel natural, but it's coming.
It's coming. Yeah. Wow.
But with hooking, I never had to. I never struggled with hooking. It's
Wow.
interesting. Yeah.
And now I'm really curious because I have tried spinning. I've taken 2 classes on drop spindle.
Oh yeah.
And I struggled. I think there were tears by the end of the first workshop because
I
I was so frustrated.
yeah. I'm a
Um,
hopeless drop spindler. I've
okay.
tried a few times. I've had very marginal success because when I taught at Trent, I think it was, there was a woman sitting beside me who was hand spinning, drop spindling mohair just as people talked. And it was just exquisite. So I again, got out my drop spindle and thought, oh, I really have to learn this. I couldn't. So what I love to do is I have an Ashford loom that has a wheel that has a double treadle. So I really like double treadle, so I'm not sort of off balance.
Okay.
And I like to spin with locks. So the locks, when you process a fleece, you have the locks and you
Yep.
just fluff them out and kind of pull them together. And it was hard at first because it's hard to get them to grip on to one another. And
Mm.
the best way is to start with some coarser wool. Um, right now I use Gotland lamb fleeces, which are just like glorious, but they are slippery. So you kind of gotta get onto it. And the other thing for me with spinning is, because I like a lot of texture in my hooking, I like that the yarn is bumpy.
Yeah.
And I like that there are little curls sticking out. I mean, I have to work at trying to get them to stick out properly. So it works for me because of my style of sort of loose and organic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say drop the drop
The drop
spindle,
spindle.
yeah, and get a wheel, get on a wheel and
Yeah.
try. It's a lot
Well,
easier.
I'm glad I asked you because I don't know many spinners around here. At least I don't think I do. And the person who was teaching me was adamant that I learned that before I learn on the wheel. And I was like, can't I just skip this and go straight to the wheel?
I can understand in a way in that it helps you to learn how to draft the fibers. But other than that, like, it's a major coordination issue, right? Like, for me anyway, trying to spin, trying to hold, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't work for me. But anyway, that's interesting to know that you struggled with that and you persevered through to using it. Yeah. I remember being at another event and there was a gentleman spinning with that kind of a wheel with the and I could just watch him and watch his hands and the motion of it all. It's just magical to me that
It's really true. It's very relaxing once you get onto it. Not so relaxing when you're first learning.
Right.
And I wouldn't learn with locks. I would probably start with either very coarse locks, or I'd start with roving, which is just the combed fibers, just because it's a lot easier.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Something to think about
Yeah,
to add to my stash of things.
exactly.
I'm going to bring up a photo that you shared with me to talk about, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Just one second here. Oh, so special. So what can you tell us about this, Meryl?
Well, this rug, it's not like my usual style. It's very different. It was the first rug that I incorporated wet felting into. So the center is wet felted, and it's got a bit of quilt batting behind it to kind of make it puff up. And it was the first rug where I've actually written, or one of the first rugs where I've written on the front of the rug instead of around the side. And it was inspired by a friend said to me, well, the door is open now, which is the name of the rug. The door is open because once you start making changes and start changing your life, changing your attitude, you can never go back to being oblivious or to not being healthy or whatever. And so for me, I had been writing about how my door was open to being louder and taller and more exuberant, sort of like the 3-year-old that I recall that was told to be quiet because she was showing off. So it was kind of, it was an important piece that way. And there's the chakra colors in this one. The purple background is really about wisdom, and it's the crown chakra. And the rest are just a variety of the chakra colors. But yeah, so this one is different, and for me, it represents a turning point, I guess, in what I'm doing now, starting to incorporate wet felting into my hooking, and eventually, hopefully, designing a line of clothing inspired by my wild women. That will be mainly wet felted. That'll have a little bit of hooking in it, but it'll be mainly wet felting. So
That is exciting.
yeah,
That's
it
exciting.
is. It really is. So yeah, you wouldn't necessarily look at this piece and go, oh, that's Meryl's hooking. Like, I don't think anyway. Like, there are other pieces, like a lot of my wild women, people will look at them and they'll know it's mine. So this one is kind of an outlier, which I'm okay with.
Well, yeah, I think it's good to have those too, to like play and stretch. Now, can you tell us or tell why, like what the zigzag down the center is
Oh,
or
that's
what
the
that
crack.
represents?
That's the opening. So
Okay.
that's the opening. So it's like once you start to open up, open your heart, open your creativity, whatever, that's the crack. And then once an egg is cracked, for example, you can't uncrack it. And so once you start making changes, it's just going to continue to open wider and wider.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And how big is it? Because it's always hard on the
Oh,
internet, you know.
yeah. I
Is it
think
a
it's
large piece?
26
Oh,
by 22. I don't know.
oh, okay.
Can you see it?
I'm
I've got
gonna
it in
come
front of
back
me.
to you.
Okay.
There we go.
So it's this
Oh, wow.
big. So a good size.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was actually the first piece other than chair pads that I've done that's an oval. So that was a little
Oh.
bit challenging.
And do you normally do a specific shape? Like, is it always rectangular or do you have a favorite shape?
I like rectangles. I do. The piece behind me is a square. It's 30 by 30, but normally I would do rectangles. There's something pleasing about the
Mhm.
proportions of a rectangle. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've done in my wet felting. I'm starting to do a few sort of um, edges that are not defined, that are not a particular shape.
Yep.
Uh,
Oh, fascinating. Fascinating. Oops, sorry about that. And I'm curious if you wanted to sort of share. I have seen a little bit about your work with organizations, and I just think it's so fascinating because I used to work in a very unhealthy organization, and I would have loved somebody like you to come in and sort of like shake things up a little bit or talk differently than the business world that I knew anyway. Maybe that's
Yes,
not your
well,
experience.
I think you're not alone there. So, I
Okay.
have a background in organization development. So I have a master's degree in clinical and industrial psychology, and so I had been in management consulting, had done kind of that whole thing, and you know had been part of what are they called visions, you know, sitting around a table and doing vision statements and things like that.
Strategic planning and
Yeah, and I thought people are so tired of these team engagement types of projects that maybe don't have any lasting impact. Nothing to show for it a little bit later. So, my first project was with Department of Environment Water Group, and they had a number of new hires, and people didn't necessarily know one another. So I started out teaching them to hook by teaching one person. They had to divide up in pairs. So teaching one person how to hook, and then they had to teach their partner, who was somebody they didn't know, they didn't work with regularly, and to hook. And then so that was great. They all did 4-inch squares, which became an installation in their piece of work, place of work. And then what we did is we did an exercise of their vision of the organization, but I got them sketching, and I took notes and used their language and followed their gestures and things like that, and came up with a design for them. And then I fed the design back to them, and they agreed that it did seem to represent. And then I took my Camp frame into their workplace for 3 weeks, and they all hooked on it, and so they started having meetings around the frame, and 3 people could hook at a time on it, and now it's part of this installation with the small pieces. And then most recently, I've done a couple of other projects with one is with a nonprofit group called Add Some House, and they were building a new facility for people who were previously unhoused, and it was called the Sunflower House, named after a housing advocacy person who had loved sunflowers. So they asked me to design a sunflower, and I said, "Well, you realize I'm an abstract artist, right?" They said, "Yeah, we just want, an idea." So I did a very abstracted sunflower, taught them how to hook in an afternoon, and then again left my frame with them, and then I'd go in once a week and help them hook. And then this year, what I did was, because I tend to only have 1 or 2 of these projects a year. This year, I've been working with an organization called Landing Strong, and their mandate is to help people who are diagnosed with PTSD. So this was the first time that I've worked with people's clients as opposed to the employees. And it was so fabulous. So it was a group of about 50% men and women, and I taught them hook to hook, and they had to hook a 4-inch square of um, how joy felt. Um, and then I also used my creativity workbook, because whenever I teach, I always get people journaling because it's part of my process. And they were just amazing, because when you get people journaling in a workplace, they're not they're there because they have to be there, right? And they also maybe don't feel quite so ready to share
Yeah.
what's in their hearts, right, with their coworkers. So whereas this group, I mean, they're all there totally motivated to get well. And they would be writing and writing and writing, and what I do with journaling is have them sketch as well. So writing and sketching to the point where the 5 minutes would be up, and people are still, like, half the group is still writing, and that they just really took to it. So this fall I'm doing the same program again. They've asked me to do it without the hooking, because they found the men were not that interested in the hooking, which is very interesting, because when I've done it at corporate settings, the men are just as interested as the women. And in fact, most of my corporate jobs have been with men. But I think that people who are suffering maybe don't feel so much like taking chances
Yeah.
on something that they, and maybe they don't have the concentration, or whatever. But so anyway, I'm going to do the journaling this year, and we'll see where the hooking fits in. I may try to fit it in with one of their staff development days or something. But yeah, it's been great. It's really nice to be able to take something into the corporate setting that is so tactile, and that also I got a note from the Department of Environment 2 years after we had done the installation, saying, the impact is still there. Like, people walk in and everybody's sort of proudly saying, oh, this is what we did, and this was our vision statement for, and yeah, it's pretty awesome.
That's really special.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very curious about the PTSD too. My husband has PTSD,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
we
that's
know many people that do.
Yes.
And yeah, I could see it being a challenge to get them to, and I say them totally generalizing, obviously.
Yeah.
The journaling and the sketching would be stretch out of potentially their comfort zone enough that then to add the layer of rug cooking would be a lot.
Yeah. Well,
Some-
actually, the journaling and sketching was effortless. Like, it
Oh,
really
wonderful.
felt, I was surprised. I thought it might have been tough. And I think I'm learning a lot about that population and reading a lot, because I'm there just as a resource person. I'm not there as a therapist or anything in that capacity. But the one thing I learned is that that population has trouble multitasking.
Mhm.
So, when you normally teach hooking, you can go on and keep talking as people hook.
Mhm.
That just did not work with this group. And the second day, so I did 5 sessions with each group. The second session, I tried a little bit of that, and everything kind of, that whole afternoon fell apart, and I had to come back with apologies the next week. So for me, it's exciting, because I'm learning about what works for this group, and not that everybody with PTSD is the same, but there are some similarities, especially in terms of the multitasking, because I think that when you're trying to hold it all together, you're using a lot of your brain to do that. So you can't then do 2 other things. You maybe can do 1 other thing, but not 2 other things.
Yeah. No, I think that's so fascinating, and I'm excited to hear that that's happening in different organizations. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I could keep talking. I know I love hearing about what people are doing, and it's so fascinating. And your pieces behind you, I keep getting distracted because they are also so beautiful, and I just wish I could touch them.
Yes. Well, this one in particular has a lot of velvet in it, recycled velvet, and sweaters, and it's done in all the chakra colors, and it's called Cozy Chakra Joy. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful.
Because that's one of the things I'm also doing, is mounting my work on, this is on not artist canvas, gallery canvas. So, and that's why I didn't write around the edges of this one, because it's on the edge of the canvas.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Thank you so much, Meryl, for taking the
Oh.
time to chat today and share all the things that you're up to. It's very exciting to hear. And people that want to get in touch with you, I will put your website below the YouTube in
Okay.
that section. But you also have a book. Well, you have a book and a journal. Did you want to
I have
just share
two
the title?
books. So I have
Yeah.
One Loop at a Time, a story of rug hooking, healing, and creativity. And then I have One Loop at a Time, the creativity book workbook. So this is the first book. So it's really the story of how I reinvented myself. And then the second one is a workbook for people who want to get started with creative journaling and getting unblocked on a creative level. And the best place to buy those, especially for Americans, is on my website. Because if you buy through Amazon, in the US, it's in US dollars, and if you buy on my website, of course, it's Canadian dollars, which is worth 74 cents today.
Yeah, big difference.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have that link below for people that want to get in touch or read more about you and follow you.
Thank you so much. And if people could follow me on Instagram, that'd be great too. I'm starting to do a new series on Instagram of videos that I think people will really like. So
Perfect. Well, I'll add that too then. Great. Thank you so much, Meryl. And I look forward to more things of what you're up to in the future. That
Thank
is
you.
great. My computers. There we go. Take care. Thank you, everybody, for watching.